Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Vinny Brusco Show.
And here we go.
I'm surprised the Blasio even gave him that much. I'm surprised they didn't go in.
I know. She got a little, nothing. There's nothing. Not even like, I was like, roll out the VCR and put on a movie and forget all that shit.
No. They're just it's the city schools are rough, dude. I don't know how they do it. I do not know how they do it, man.
Yeah.
Where does she work, by the way? Which school?
She's in Riverdale.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Congratulations on the podcast, man.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate it, man.
Up and running again. Is this like a second version of the podcast, would you say?
Yeah, so I'm getting, am I too loud, Nicole? We're doing loud. We're live.
It's okay.
Yes. No problem. I won't. I'm getting restricted on things I could say and not say. No,
Okay.
not my podcast. It's about other things. But no, my podcast.
She's
So
like, Ixnay, Peter.
No school talk. What?
Quiet. Don't talk badly about the school system.
So we had a podcast. I had a podcast years ago with WFAN. It was, it's a small thing, and it kind of started to build, and the company kind of shifted, and some people. One of the guys that really was very supportive of the podcast had left for about a year or two. So with that, the podcast just kind of went to the wayside, and it kind of just disbanded, and we were kind of asked to kind of just shut down for a little bit. But he came back, and I jumped at the opportunity to bring it back to his attention, and he just is the man. He kind of doesn't like to have his name shouted out, so I kind of just keep it low key.
Sure.
But he's one of the minds of WFAN. So he brought it back, and he was all on board. And he's like, yeah, just do what you got to do, man. It's going to be good. I trust you. And the digital department that we have now is pretty kick ass. So it's going to just take off.
Yeah, it's weird how like these things happen to you or for you, and it depends on your perspective on that. But when these things happen, like it's like a gut check, right? Like when the first podcast, the first version of it shut down, what was that like? What was that narrative that was going on in your head?
Oh, dude, I was done. Like I was spent because not for nothing, but it's a passion project too. So it's like I put a lot of time and effort into it. So it's not more about the finances just yet. It's more about like I love what I'm doing. I'm having a good time. So when people tell you like, hey, we don't even want you to do your passion project anymore, we want you to just sit down and like chill with that. It's like, oh, that's pretty bad. So the fact that like I was pretty down with that, and I'm like, I don't know if obviously I'm still going to continue to host. I'm still going to continue to make content and try to be an on-air host and whatnot. But that passion project was pushed to the wayside for a bit, and it took like some guts to get back up again. It's tough. It's not easy, man.
No, it's not. And I could attest to, just kind of taking all the bumps that come along that road of like pursuing your passion and staying on pace with it and kind of, continuing on with it. And I mean, you and I have kept in touch throughout, that version of the podcast before that, obviously, and continue to, and the podcast has grown. I mean, you were at UFC events, like doing the thing, right? Like you're at the event doing the thing and in the space.
Yeah. So the craziest thing is, I've always been behind the scenes. I've done like a little one-offs here and there, maybe do like, everyone knows I love MMA, but I'm not really getting a full-time shift. I'm not getting 4 hours dedicated to it on like a Saturday evening or whatever the case is. Out of nowhere, like our first shot on air is to do a 2-hour post-fight show at the Barclays Center right after the fight's over. And it's like, okay, yeah, we could pull this off. This would be great. Meanwhile, it's like packed. It's like, I don't know what the capacity is, but close to like 20,000 people. After a crazy week of Conor McGregor, like wrecking house and like throwing things through buses. So we're like, okay, this card has been crazy as it is. It's been a nuts week. And now on top of that, it's 1:00. We're supposed to go live. I'm expected to do like a post fight. They didn't even get the main event out yet. So now we're doing a live show in front of 20,000 people while fights are going on. It was crazy. That was the first time I've been on air hosting my own show. But we did it. We did it for 2 hours. We had great interviews with Khabib Nurmagomedov, Rose Namajunas. They came up afterwards and hung out with us. It was just dope. It was just a fantastic feeling, you know. So that's how I started off my like radio tenure of being an on-air host. And then, you know, it's kind of had to check myself. That's not always going to be that grand, but it's been pretty awesome ride since.
Yeah, it's an up and down, right? And I always, in any aspect of life, I always try to like, you know, it's never as good as it can be, and it's never as bad as it can be, right? It's somewhere in the middle, right? You hit your highs, you hit your lows, and you know, you count your blessings in between.
Oh my goodness. I mean, the highs, there's tons of highs and lows. And Vinny, you know this, bro. We worked together for quite some time for a while. Like there's the waves come in. It's like, oh, here's new blood. Here's someone stepping in, whether it's new PD, whether it's a new host, whether it's whatever the case is. And everything's just exciting. And then reality checks back in. It's like, oh, what really has changed? And is it a good change? And sometimes the what we used to know, the devil that we know is better than the devil that we don't know. You know, so just chaos. I mean, dude, I don't know about you, but working at the rock station we were at for quite some time, I always felt like I couldn't get ahead because we were just always constantly like always like cycling. Like someone would come in, they'd leave, come in and leave. And whether it was by choice or whether it was by just downsizing, it was just a crazy cycle. And I never felt like I can get anywhere. But it's tough. And you do, Vinny, how long have you been doing this podcast for now?
14 years.
That's crazy. That's crazy. But you're one of the originators, man. You're old school. You're OG.
I mean, it's like a non-negotiable in my life, right? It's like the thing that like I'm gonna do it and continue to do it, no matter how many people, no matter how many downloads, whatever. And it's grown. Don't get me wrong. And it's taken on so many different versions and been in different studios with hosts and co-hosts. And you know, you can attest that too. It's like you almost certain like you're behind it, and that's all that matters, right? It's just you just keep on showing up day in and day out, and you just keep on doing it, right? And to me, it's just like you said, it's a passion thing. Like this is my world. Like I love doing this, you know.
Oh my God, dude. I wouldn't listen. And then I see like my kids are watching me do this and stuff like that, and they get excited. So I'm like, do I want to torture them their whole life and have them do this type of stuff? I maybe that's not a good idea, but I see them and they're like, I come home, like I came home from Christmas morning, and my oldest is sitting there and like recording stuff, and he's like talking in a mic, and he's got the video ready. I'm like, you know what? It's cool. It's like I'm kind of like rubbing off on the kids, and they're really excited about it. So it's like for that, it pushes me harder to want to succeed more because the kids want to see you succeed, you know?
Yeah. Did you do that as a kid?
Let's see. What did I do? As a kid, I definitely had a mic in my hand. Dude, I remember driving up to Maine on vacation, my parents, and like they had this old station wagon, and we were driving up to like 10-hour trip, and I had this stupid mic in my hand. And I was sitting in the corner, like the left side behind my father, and I'd just be like whispering into this stupid mic that had a little echo to it, but trying to tell jokes. And I'm not a funny guy at all, but that's what I would do. Like I think I'm a comedian and stuff like that. But so I always knew that I wanted to entertain. I always felt there was a connection there. I tried different things. I tried being in bands and stuff like that. I tried the music thing. I tried the music scene for like 15, 20 years, which is crazy. Right. So I always knew that it was some sort of platform that I wanted to be part of. Entertainment was my goal. I just definitely tried a bunch of different things though, you know?
Yeah, I had a similar thing in my, like when I was a kid, I told the story before, but I like walk around my neighborhood with my Talkboy tape recorder and just record bits, right? Just record random bits. And I do see that with my daughter, like she, you know, she'll be whatever she's doing, she's in the entertainment space, you know what I mean? And she's always putting on a show for the family, whatever it is. So it is one of those really weird positions where you see them in their, like their purest form, right? Before they're influenced by any outside culture. And you wonder, like, do I want to put them in this scenario where like this pursuit is just never ending, right? But I think that's a lot of things though.
Oh yeah. And listen, Vin, I mean, when you grew up too, like, did you play sports? Because I played sports, and I was like, oh, you know, I'm going to be the next, maybe not Babe Ruth, but I was whoever would. Howard Johnson was my guy. I loved Howard Johnson. So like, I'm going to be the next Howard Johnson. You know what I mean? And then after reality sets in when you're 13, 14 years old, I'm like, okay, let me just, you know, hopefully I can get to the minors. Maybe that would be awesome. And then you're like, all right, I'm not even going to make the high school team. So you reality check, you know, you reality takes over. You're like, okay, this is not going to work out the way I planned it to be, but you see the kids and you want to help motivate them, and you see what their talents are, and you just want to help navigate them as best as possible. I see the passion that they have for technology these days that I never had before. I used to just play the games. My middle guy is sitting there and he wants to make the games. He's 7. I'm like, dude, you're taking tech courses already? I haven't taken a tech class in my life. And you're 7, you want to take tech courses. So it's crazy to see these kids what they want to do. But I'm like, at some point I'm like, okay, maybe I wish I had that opportunity back then, where maybe I could have guided myself a little bit more, you know?
Yeah. It's a hard position to be in, because you want to motivate them in pursuing their thing, but then you also don't want to, put them in the crosshairs of that exposure and that potential of like disappointment or just kind of pursuing. But if it's a passion, it's a passion, and you have to kind of fuel that a bit,
Yeah, I mean, you don't want to kill their passion too, because the thing is too, like I like Finn. You see your kids, you see them do things like, oh, this is awesome. I definitely want to help motivate them to do this if they really love it. But then at one point in time, where does it go to, like, if you really want to do that, that's a little bit more expensive. Like baseball is getting expensive.
Right.
We bought catcher's equipment. We got like 3 different bats. We have 10 gloves, everything. There's a jersey for everything.
Right.
It's whatever. It is what it is. We like it. But at some point in time, it's like, when do we want to keep pushing? Like, hey, do we want to get the clinics? Do we want to go here? Do we want to do the camps for a month? Or do we want to just have fun? Because after a while, the practice, it ain't so fun anymore. You just want to play the games. You just want to hit the home run. So
right.
You don't want to push too much.
Yeah, no, definitely not. What has been, obviously MMA is gigantic, right?
Yeah.
And the growth of that sport, I think, has been probably unlike any other. I think all the other sports, they have their roots and they've grown over time, and they kind of have this baseline of history, right? Where UFC was very big, completely off the map, and then out of the gate rocket. What was your relationship to the UFC growing up and watching it? And what was your experience like kind of throughout that time?
So I still can't remember exactly when I first started watching. I mean, I think I was early 2000s. I don't know, like the Ultimate Fighter, definitely the first season of it with Forrest Griffin and Stephen Bonner. Like that was an epic fight. That was an epic finale. And that was definitely one of the first fights I remember seeing. But I think I had been watching, and then someone like, hey, you got to watch this fight. But I mean, like Andre Arlovsky, the Vitor Belforts of the world, the Chuck Liddells, the Randy Couture's, the Tito Ortiz's, the Tito Ortiz and Randy Couture's definitely were fights that I was locked in on. And it was like one of those things where it was like casually, like my boys would want to get together, watch some fights. We'd all hang out for whatever amount of time. And it was a good time. And I never even kept track as much. Like my friends were always inviting me, and I'd always go. There was no big boxing fights. We'd watch. The Tyson's reign was basically over by that point in time. There was really nothing boxing wise. So that was it. Because I didn't watch boxing as much, but I did see some of those big pay-per-views back in the day, the Holyfields, the Lennox Lewis's of the world. But UFC seemed to be the only thing that was like worthwhile to watch. I did fall off for a couple of years, but I always had kept interest. It didn't make a difference. And then really when they started pushing again to get back into New York, I was already back into it by then, because the Conor McGregor aura had come up. Anderson Silva was the era that I was all in on. But once Conor started coming up again, that really grasped my company. A lot of guys around there were like, oh, the Irishman or whatever. They love the Irish love Conor McGregor.
Right.
So
to say the least.
So yeah. So when he started to like fight, people were like asking questions like, who's he fighting, this and that. Like I was like, oh, I know all this. Like this is something that I'm actually into. I've always been into it. I actually can speak to it. So they were like, hey, do you want to do a podcast, my company? I was like, yeah, of course. And this was before New York, they came to New York. So I was trying to push for it, and it took a while, but it's been nice to see the climb, because a lot of people have been very open-minded to it since they've seen the climb of the sport. And you're right. It's such a fast riser right now, the record setting, as far as like, where they go in the numbers, as far as, a sport, a mainstream sport. ESPN made that crazy deal with the UFC. I mean, it's on a different level. It's the personalities. It's Dana White being so aggressive, being able to control the market a little bit with fighting and not having crazy amounts of promotions. Boxing is doing a disservice. There's nothing exciting about boxing anymore. The most exciting thing is to watch Jake Paul and Nate Robinson fight. That's not exciting to me. That's not cool. So UFC is definitely it's on a different level right now. It's awesome. And the other cool thing is, and this is what my podcast is basically kind of going towards right now, is you and I have been into UFC forever. We've been watching for years. MMA. It's not just UFC, but MMA in general.
Yeah. UFC kind of is like saying Coca-Cola, right? Like,
right.
You know what I mean? Like there's you use UFC interchangeably with MMA, but there's so much MMA, and we just default to saying UFC.
Right. And to be honest with you, before I started watching UFC, I watched Pride fights.
Sure.
Mm-hmm. Pride was the first thing I did, and I it was a little crazy because if everyone knows the rules, it's a little different. With the first round is 10 minutes long, and everyone's just like, "What's going on here?" So it was just people adapting to that. But anyway, that being said, the UFC has definitely I forgot what I was trying to say, but
what your podcast framework is.
Thank you. So it's not just about me loving MMA and talking to UFC. I'm bringing in a lot of celebrities and other athletes that are big into it too, because you and I have been with it forever. I like to know other people that are into it too, because I know it's big. The people around me don't honestly, the people in New York love baseball. They love football. They love the Knicks. They love NBA. They don't care about MMA, but there's a huge audience. I want to know who these people are, but they're all walks of life. And I'm interviewing baseball stars and football stars, and I'm trying to get some NBA guys on, and that's where we're trying to connect. And whether it's a musician, whether it's an actor, I had Sean Patrick Flannery on. The guy, I don't know if you know Boondock Saints, stuff like that.
Of course, absolutely.
Yeah, he was on, and he's like a big jiu-jitsu guy. He's at his own studio, and he just did a film based off of BJJ, and fights Edson Barbosa in the film. I'm like, dude, this is awesome. Like, there's a big world out there for MMA fans, and it's nice to see that other people that I respect are like it too, because it's had such a bad name for quite some time.
Well, it had a bad name because, again, it was just like cage fighting, right? So like you think like when you have like this wholesome feeling of like mom and pop baseball and apple pie, or if you want to go to football and the leather helmets and the gridiron, and then you have cage fighting, and I grew up in a household that I watched the UFC when I was a kid. I mean, I remember watching it, when they had different attire on and there was no weight classes, and it was, it was literally just fighting, because my dad is a jiu-jitsu practitioner and has been for 40 years. So I grew up in a household that jiu-jitsu and that was just common. You know what I mean? Watching UFC and fights on TV was just common. And it definitely had a bad name. And then, there, like I said, there was definitely a lull, but then, you have the Ariel Hawanis and then the ESPNs who, kind of went behind it. And then now it's on network television and the pay-per-views, and there's Fight Island. And there is this pocket of people that, kind of, especially like you said, in the tri-state area, that's like, no, it's MMA is big. It's bigger than I think we realize.
Yeah. Well, listen, the fact is that it was on ABC, the first fight back this year, Max Holloway, Calvin Kattar, it was on ABC.
What a fight.
It was unbelievable.
Unbelievable.
And it was on ABC at 3:00 in the afternoon.
Right.
And it was a crazy card too, because you remember you got the back-to-back knockouts in the first round.
Yep.
An awesome fight between Matt Brown and Carlos Condit, two old vets of sport. And then you got Max Holloway, who is by far one of the best symbols of the UFC. Like, the face of the UFC, he's got to be there. Like, I don't think he's got as much hype as a Conor McGregor, but he should. Like,
right. Well,
Jorge Masvidal does, but I think Max Holloway should be up there too.
Well, it's his skill set, right? So he's a very skilled fighter. He's very technical. He's very clean, but he doesn't have the WWE type of persona behind him, around him.
He's got a persona, but it's different. It's a different persona, and he's just a good dude. Like, he'll talk his smack. It's not as clean as a Conor McGregor. It's not as witty. It's not as he doesn't curse like Conor McGregor does.
Right.
So it's a different type of style. But listen, that guy's a stud, and I spoke to him years back before. What fight was it before? Could have been before the Dustin Poirier fight. but he was just chill, and he's a different personality. Like a lot of these fighters, like Conor McGregor, for example, the guy hypes himself with a group of guys that just says he's basically untouchable. He can go in there and be Khabib Nurmagomedov, even though you and I both know he probably can't.
Right.
But these guys hype him up so much, you could do anything you want. Max is they're more like chill. They're like they're more down to earth. They're about protection. They're about like, hey, you can't take that much damage. We really want to save you from yourself, because look at a guy like BJ Penn. You and I know BJ Penn. This guy grew up in UFC. He's a warrior. He's been in some epic brawls. This guy's getting DUIs every year, like it's his birthday. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. He's in trouble every few months. It's terrible.
Right.
And like whether it's battering his wife or I don't know if it's battering his wife is one of them, but there's been some domestic issues for sure, bar brawls and stuff like that. It's like this guy can't get out of his own way, but nobody's there to help him. And nobody's there. And that's one thing that I preach these days. I'm like, yo, you just have to really sit here. These athletes are people. And whether or not you want to agree with everything they stand for, people do need to help and protect them a little bit from themselves. And Conor McGregor was that type of guy where no one stepped in, and you need to do that. But Max, he's got a good unit around him. So he's a little different persona. So he doesn't have the edge like Conor or Jorge Masvidal or Nate Diaz, but he's got something to him. He does have swagger, that's for sure.
Well, I think you saw a shift in Conor McGregor, and it was, for me, I believe it was the Cowboy Cerrone fight when he won that, and Tony Robbins got in the octagon. And I said to myself, and I got my certification in life coaching, and I was like, tell me fucking Conor McGregor has a life coach. Tell me this motherfucker has a life coach. And that's what it takes, though, right? And it's not about who it is, right? Obviously, he's going to get the best of the best, but it's about a mindset. And like, to your point, the people that you're surrounding yourself by, right? What's the old expression? You're the culmination of the 5 people you surround yourself by. So, I mean, if you're surrounding yourself by Tony Robbins, you're going to have a different approach. And I think we're seeing that now after you achieve so much, right? After you've got it all, like, what else do you have to prove? Now it's about, I think, to me, from his standpoint, it's probably I just want to fight. I just want to fight. I win some, I lose some. It is what it is. He's made all the money. I think some of the novelty fights that are going on, I'm not a big, I ordered the Tyson fight. Don't get me wrong. I had to order the Tyson fight.
Shame on you, bro.
I know. It was just like, you had to, right? It was fun. It was just some food with a buddy, and we watched the fight. It is what it is. But now they're really spiraling out of control.
Ben Askren versus Jake Paul's coming up, and that's just like, as an MMA guy like that, I feel like very like motherly almost. It's like, please don't screw this up for us. Like, don't screw up the family. Don't ruin the family. You're gonna screw it up. Because Jake Paul, dude, we all saw what happened with Nate Robinson, and I had no expertise as far as how Nate was training, but it didn't look like he worked on defense at all.
Right.
And he was, and that's a huge thing. And at the very least, Ben Askren should be able to last with Jake Paul, because he has learned the art of defense, because he's been training in MMA for decades. This is not new to him. Now, no one's expecting him to knock out Jake Paul, but it's like one of those things where it's like, I don't really want to watch his train wreck, but I have to.
Right.
It is kind of like, it is part of my job. Like, it is MMA based, because Ben Askren's a MMA guy, but it's like, dude, I guess I want to watch it because I really just crossed my fingers that Ben survives. I think he'll go to the decision, but I can't see him knocking Jake Paul out.
I think this is a weird time, because as far back as I can remember, and I'm just correct me if I'm wrong, but I think this all started with the CM Punk thing. Like, CM Punk, I can't think of anything before that. And again, I might be wrong. Maybe you could say Kimbo Slice to some degree has that kind of same thing, but he was just a backyard fighter and a banger. I mean, let's just call for what it is. The guy was just huge and could swing. So there was like this just knockout potential with Kimbo Slice, right? But then when CM Punk came on, and I actually bumped into him online at Comic-Con, getting Starbucks, and he was such a nice guy, and I stood with him for 15 minutes. He bought me a coffee, signed the coffee cup. Such a nice dude, like such a nice dude. He brought this weird dynamic to this, and it could be, I guess, boxing or MMA at this point, where it's like we're just kind of bringing in people that, like, he's an athlete for sure, right? But he's not a fighter.
No, but they've tried to change that, like Ken Shamrock, Brock Lesnar. They've always tried to.
Yeah, but Brock
change the mold.
Lesnar,
He's a
Lesnar
wrestler.
he's a wrestler. I mean, it's not like he has no business being there. He has some credentials to be in that type of situation where CM Punk really didn't. Like CM Punk was like, hey, by the way, he does very athletic, don't get me wrong, not taking anything away from the guy, but he didn't have like the resume to say like I deserve to be. And I think that's similar to like the Jake Paul situation.
Right. Well, listen, I mean, and CM Punk did try to do the best he could do. He brought in Duke Rufus, which is a legit coach.
Yeah.
That's not like something like, oh, well, I'm going to act like I'm going to be an MMA guy. But, that was definitely one, but like Herschel Walker too. And some of these other, like, I feel like there was a time where there was more radio bits than anything else, but like there was the Junkie versus the Flunky and like all these, like Opie and Anthony did some boxing matches. I feel like maybe Howard Stern did some stuff too, where they'd have like these like faux celebrity people like kind of get into a boxing match and stuff like that. And I feel like that was like the originator of it. Like, didn't Canseco do it once too?
But those were under the guides of it being just for shits and giggles. Like there's a shits and giggles fight where like the CM Punk fight was like a legitimate fight. Like
he was on pay-per-view twice, dude. He was on pay-per-view twice. That's crazy. These guys are working their tail off to get to pay-per-views, and they're like, nah, sorry, man. You're gonna be the undercards on some like random some random fight night or whatever.
Saturday, right.
Yeah, and then yet here you go, and CM Punk first fight against like Mike Jackson, was it?
Yeah.
And then the second one, no, Mickey Gall.
Mickey Gall. Yeah.
Was legit. He's again professional, legit. But Mike Jackson, I think, was the other guy that he fought. That was like, yo, we're kicking you out of the UFC at this because that was just brutal. That definitely. Listen, you're right. Though that was definitely one of the first to like put on a show. But I think there's always been shows. You look at Bellator, I always think it's a show. They put it together, these two old fighters that like I haven't seen in decades. They put who was it? Well, Kimbo was fought Data 5000 that one time.
It's true.
And then who was it? I mean, they were always Ken Shamrock.
No, there's always at Bellator. There's always some type of novelty card.
Yeah,
and then like the tournaments and stuff like that. Like even those are kind of
and I felt like that was something where it was like a joke. It's like my buddy's like, "Yo, dude, you know who's fighting again?" I'm like, "No, who?" And it's like Wanderlei Silva again. I'm like, why? Why are you doing that to yourself? But they do. They've been doing that for so long, and I think they're actually trying to get away from it. Hence, like even though Yoel Romero is like 45 years old maybe, but he is legit, so I'll take that. But I think they're trying to get away from that. But I think those are more neck and neck with what boxing is pulling off, because they got nothing else to go to. I mean, think about it, Vinny. They just announced the card right now, which is cool. It is good. Canelo Alvarez versus Billy Joe Saunders. Like that's actually a legit fight in boxing. But to make that, it took like 3 years. We've been talking about that fight forever. Like that's bad. That's not good. That's not good marketing.
Well, I think that's the big thing behind it, is like the marketing behind it, because there are some good fighters out there and there are some good fights to watch, but again, I think it's the marketing that kind of comes behind it. And then again, the allure of the Conor McGregors, the persona that the UFC kind of puts out there rather than boxing, where it just seems to be a bit more reserved.
Yeah, I mean, boxing, the top fighters are good, but they're hidden. They fight once every other year, maybe, and that's just not a good thing. They do try to hype up the fights. I mean, that's every single fight, but the UFC's been able to find a way to promote their fighters a lot better lately. They really have. I
think with boxing, you have to go pretty far down the rabbit hole to get into like these really intricate, good fights. That the common person, myself included, isn't like, I'm like, oh yeah, I've seen that guy before, but I don't know his name. You know what I mean?
Well, that's also because here's the other thing too. In boxing, the whole allure of boxing is like, who is this guy? Is he undefeated? Who has he fought? Has he been fighting tin cans? Whereas in MMA, it's like everyone's got a loss, and it's like you just assume that it's rare if you see a fighter that's in UFC in a pay-per-view that is undefeated. If you see someone undefeated, it's like, wow, they're really special, but that's so rare. It's so rare. So it's kind of, there's no novelty of like the undefeated fighter anymore. Whereas in boxing, if there's a loss on their record, it's like, oh, this guy's a scrub.
Right.
And it's just because of how they, I don't know. You're right. Again, you have to really go deep and to set up these matches. And there's a lot of things that are wrong with it. It's just too top heavy. That's really what it comes down
It's
to.
top heavy, and there's so many belts, and there's so many divisions. And,
but they belong to the same guy.
Right. That's the crazy part, right?
They
That's
belong to the same guy.
You see one guy wearing 5 different belts, like, all right, like this is kind of, and they're all different boxing commissions. And you're like, what am I following?
Yeah, no, they got to, that's part of the issue too, is it's just like, because they have they have different, think about those. And those guys max out. You're talking about UFC, I think is a more competitive sport right now. It's a more, it's a very diverse. There's a lot of guys with specialties, and the matchups are just really getting good with Sean Shelby and Mick Maynard in the UFC have really done a good job. And then you sit and watch boxing and you go, there's all these belts, there's all this stuff, but really the top guys get paid a ton of money and everyone else gets paid nothing because they're just nobodies. Where the UFC, they get nothing. These guys are pay-per-view. Like Figueiredo in the flyweight division, I think just started getting pay-per-view points after his last card, or is asking for pay-per-view points. He got the belt. You know, it's like their pay structure is so different because these guys are more hungry still. Because they have to to try to fight for it. They have to eat. You know, it's not UFC, MMA is not at the boxing pay grade yet. You know,
right. It's like hockey versus baseball.
Oh yeah.
Watching that last fight with Conor McGregor, right?
Yeah.
Is there anybody in your mind that's like, for me, he was, and potentially still is, depending on the next fight they do with him, but he was like a must order pay-per-view caliber guy, right? If he was on the card, you're ordering it for the most part. I mean, I'm staying up for it. I'm ordering it. You know, I'm putting toothpicks in my eyeballs. I'm staying up to watch this fight. Is there anybody in your mind that is that caliber that's like a must? And again, a must order pay-per-view. I have to stay up late and watch this fight.
Well, I think Max is up there, but again, you're talking like Conor McGregor numbers are ridiculous. I think he owns the top 6 pay-per-views in UFC. I think he's like 4 or 5 of them. Like, it's ridiculous. He's a top seller. No one can really touch him. I mean, Max Holloway, someone who's up there for sure. Israel Adesanya, I think his hype is going to get to that point. Jorge Masvidal and Nate Diaz is somebody. And I was just talking about this the other day with somebody too. It's like Conor McGregor, you could put him in headline any card, make it a pay-per-view, and not be a belt, and it'll still sell.
Yeah,
it'll still sell. Nate Diaz is probably that type of guy too. Whether you like, first of all, you look at his record, it's terrible. He's like 500, which is nothing to really write home about. But he builds a fight in a way that no one else can, and he shocks people when they least expect it. When it's like, oh, this is going to be an easy. Conor McGregor is going to go in there, wipe the floor with Nate Diaz. That's the fight where, you know, all of a sudden Conor's on his back. You know, Nate's got Conor's back, and he's submitting him and stuff like that. And you're like, oh, I didn't expect that. Like, that's not what I expected. That's what Nate does. He just stirs the pot. But he will always find a way to hype. I think that he's one of those type of guys. As far as other like champions, like I wanted Cody to be that guy, but that backfired. I mean, Cody Garbrandt, I love him. I think he was close to it, but his back injuries, and then he lost 2 fights to TJ Dillashaw in a row. That was just not good. Trying to think I think Israel Adesanya. I really think that he's that type of guy. John Jones is up there too, obviously.
John Jones, it's just, there's, for me, I agree with you on the Israel Adesanya thing, but for me, the John Jones aspect, the thing, it's like after a while it just gets played out to some degree, you know, like with everything that goes into it, everything that comes out afterwards with it, like it dilutes the actual fight for me. Again, maybe that's just my novice approach to it, but like when you after these things happen time and time again, it's just like, all right, like it's just and he's probably, if not one of the greatest, obviously, right? Potentially the greatest, but when there's all this stuff around it afterwards, for me, it's just kind of like, it just kind of smothers it a little bit.
Well, the thing with John, and again, take what they do in the cages. This is what I just talked about the other day too on my podcast. Was like, it frustrates me that these guys are such jerks sometimes. Like some of these guys really, Colby Covington, somebody that nobody wants any part of him at all, but he's a really talented fighter. Like the guy's actually a really good fighter in the cage, and he puts on some good fights. If he didn't have that jerk mentality, jerk persona,
Is that an act?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I saw him. Interviewed him once. I told him straight to his face, I said, dude, you're an incredible fighter. Like legitimately, if you look at his fights up until the Kamaru Usman fight, he really only lost like a round or two in all his fights combined. Like he's that good. But I told him, I was like, dude, your skills in the cage are a question. Like they're unbelievable, but I just don't like what you do and you say. Like it just comes off really bad. I can't respect that. I respect you in the cage, but I can't respect anything else. And he kind of just like, oh, I get it, man. Like he was cool about it. Was it like he's doing it because first of all, he grew up like liking WWE and all that other stuff. I think he was in like not an AEW, but some other like offset promotion for like Impact Wrestling, I think it was. But he grew up with that, like watching those type of sports. So watching that type of wrestling. So he's into that. He's trying to take that persona on because he was about to get kicked out of the UFC at one point in time.
Right.
But without that type of personality, people wouldn't pay attention to him. So I don't like to talk about that aspect of the fights, like of the fighting game. I really want to break down like who stepping in the cage is a really good matchup for each other. How is it going to Paulo Costa, Israel Adesanya? That was supposed to be this amazing fight. It backfired.
Yeah.
But the breakdown of that was exciting beforehand. Like this fight can go in any way. We didn't realize that Israel Adesanya is that much of a killer, and how Paulo Costa was just going to turn into like a turtle, and just not show up. But that being said, though, like it's like you really that persona is it's something that not everyone can do. That style that like you getting on the mic and jumping in front of a mic and being able to hype up their next fight. It just not everyone's good like that. Not everyone's gifted. But Jones, one thing about him that he could hype up a fight a little bit, but the fakeness afterwards, I can't deal with. Like that's what you were getting at is like the fakeness of John Jones, like respected my opponent, this and that, the other thing, and I've changed my ways and I'm a better person, and blah 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 blah. And then like you see that he'll do something stupid outside of the promotion, and whether he's get arrested for something or whatever the case is, he's just always full of it.
I think again, I think that it's more nuanced than that. I think it's probably a part of him that wants to be that good guy, not to the capacity of like, maybe some of it is just for the cameras, but I think a part of him does want, because I think there's probably a part of all of us that knows like, this is right, fuck up, you know what I mean? Like, and that's probably his bag, right? He probably in that moment, he probably is being authentic and genuine, right? But then it just kind of defaults back to what he's comfortable with and what he knows. And unfortunately, that just seems to be just trouble or, whatever it is. And we're all flawed and none of us are perfect. So I don't fault him for that. But to me, afterwards, it's like all this going into it. And then you find out all this news breaks, all this stuff. And it's kind of like, all right, like whatever. Like it just loses its flair.
I'm over it.
Yeah.
That's basically what it is with a lot of these sports these days. Like everything breaks and it's just like, oh, again.
Yeah.
Like whatever sport it is, whatever, like you hear these guys, they have to say the right thing. It's one of those things where it's like it'd be refreshing for them to be honest, like, yo, guys, I'm not changing. I'm gonna mess up next week. It is what it is. Deal with it. It'd be refreshing, but they can't do it. They just can't say it. And like even like a guy like Alex Rodriguez. Right. Guy tried to say the right thing every time. Like he really was he believed himself. And then, you're sitting there cheating and doing steroids, stuff like that. It's like, how do you say that? How do you sleep at night? But they sleep at night because they got tons of money.
Right.
And they're in the public eye.
Well, it's also part of that, right? Like I think a big part of me, like growing, I was huge in the McGuire Sosa race. Like that was, that was I was videotaping them. I was all in on that McGuire and Sosa race. And that was what, 97-ish?
Around like
Yeah.
96, 97, yeah.
Yeah, in that world. And, probably a little naive and young to know exactly what was transpiring, but it was home runs and it was fun and it built and put baseball back on the map. And then after that, when you find out like they're all juiced up, you're like, all right, whatever. Like, I don't care at this point. But then there's just all the news of baseball and steroids, and eventually it gets played out and it's like, all right, whatever. Like it doesn't even shock you anymore. You know what I mean? It takes away
No.
from the allure of the sport, and it takes away afterwards. You're like, all right, whatever. Like, if Derek Jeter was on steroids, Mariano Rivera, nobody would shock me at this point, nor would I really give a shit.
Well, it's funny because it's baseball is the sport that really like had that issue, because you go through like NFL and NBA and NHL, whatever, like those other sports, people tested positive for a lot of different things. And they get suspended for like 4 games or whatever it is. And just this, whatever. It's like push under the rug. Nobody really cares. But baseball's like this like holier than thou sport where we have all these old school rules and you have to perform this way. And why do you think they're hurting so bad promotion wise? And why do you think like kids aren't as into it as like NBA, and they're not these, first of all, the athletes aren't getting hyped up as they are in NBA and NFL. But then you look at the fact is they're too old school. Listen, I'm all about changing. I don't think you need to change the sport itself, like as far as the 9-inning game and maybe the DH in the National League, fine, that's okay. But like the bat flips and like a little bit more talking and whatnot during the baseball game and stuff to each other. And they got rid of like the coaches arguing with the managers arguing with the umps and stuff like that. Like there's no personality anymore in that game. And they have to change that because they're probably going to strike at the end of this year. And it's not going to be a good thing because kids are going to say like, whatever, I'm over it. Like, yeah. It's not a kid sport anymore. It's really not. It's an old man sport. And I got to tell you, a lot of the old people don't care about it either.
Yeah, it's definitely, and again, the changes they do make in baseball are all they're for the betterment of the game, right? But they're only for the betterment of the game. Like the review and all this stuff. It's like, all right, cool, but like to your point, like allow a guy to flip a bat, like let a coach come out of a dugout, like let there be some passion and some animation in this game, because it is kind of falling by the wayside. And I grew up a huge baseball guy. I love that was my favorite sport, no question. And I mean, as I've gotten older, I've gone away from pretty much every sport. But for the most part, it definitely fell by the wayside in regards to like, it's kind of boring.
Yeah. I mean, and people feel that way. Like the station I work at, that's what we do. We talk all baseball, basically. There's not a day that goes by that we probably don't talk baseball, even when there's nothing going on, which is part of the problem too, is like NBA, NFL, they found ways to be relevant every day of the year, even when there's nothing going on. They found a way to be relevant. Baseball, they had this offseason, and it's like you have to follow structures and arbitration rules. And basically, free agency started in November, and people didn't start signing until January. That's 2-3 months of like, hey, by the way, there's this thing called Christmas, where if someone signs in November, my kids are going to want their jersey for Christmas. So you probably could have sales then, but you guys are just too busy. Let's wait till arbitration comes and see who we're going to sign. And they're not thinking logically anymore. Like NFL, I don't know if you saw, there was it wasn't wild card weekend, but it was one of the games they had on Nickelodeon.
I saw that, and I honestly don't watch pretty much any sports. I don't even watch football. I watch UFC. I will put on a hockey game for every once in a while, mainly playoff hockey. It's exciting. But outside that, I really don't watch sports, but it was on. I was at my parents' house. It was on, and I was flipping the channels. I put Nickelodeon for the kids. And I was like, why is the game on Nickelodeon? This is bizarre, but it was well done.
Yeah. And they got two of the best in the business. First of all, if you guys know Ian Eagle, he's one of the all-time greatest broadcasters out there. His son, Noah Eagle, who does the Clippers games, he was doing it for Nickelodeon, along with Nate Burleson, who's a former wide receiver in the league, and he does a great job for CBS. So it's like they're real smart. They went out there and they didn't hold anything back, and they got two really good analysts, and then they brought some Nickelodeon star in there that would kind of like just connect perfectly. It worked out. And then the slime and just everything. It was so smart. And I was talking, so I've built a relationship. So this is the one cool thing about what I've been doing. I've been building some really good relationships. And I was talking to Jan Gomes of the Washington Nationals, and we're just getting into he comes on all the time, wants to talk MMA. Awesome. But we were talking about, I was like, dude, baseball's got to do something like that. Are you not nervous? Like, this is possible you guys are going to strike. And he's like, listen, we're open to anything. He was excited. Like, he doesn't really spill all that type of stuff behind the scenes, but because he's far out of it too. Like, it's a lot of the union members and stuff like that that are telling them what's going on. But I think all the athletes are open to it because they want to. It's only going to help them out in the future, and especially if you're young in the sport, you want it to thrive.
Yeah, you have to, and the personas in baseball, and I think hockey's kind of the same way. They're like these muted kind of not, and like a Bryce Harper, right? To me, I know Bryce Harper because I know Bryce Harper, right? But I don't know Bryce Harper through like the means of baseball. If you know what I mean, like if that makes sense. Like he doesn't, like they don't put it out there, and I wonder where in the baseball lineage that kind of fell by the wayside. And I think it's a lot of like the fall of, and I'll just, maybe it's because I'm a Yankee fan. I know you're a diehard, or we're a diehard Mets fan for, you know.
Yeah, I still am. Yeah, it's terrible.
But like I don't know if it was that dynasty era ending. You know, there was a time in baseball where all of a sudden it kind of crossed over.
I mean, you think about this. The biggest star in baseball right now is Mike Trout. Nobody knows who he is. No one cares about him the way they cared about Shaq or the way they care about Patrick Holmes. Patrick Holmes is everywhere. Patrick Mahomes, sorry.
Right.
But he's everywhere. You know, LeBron James, Steph Curry, they're everywhere. These stars are everywhere, dude. You know what I mean? And it's like Mike Trout's the best player in baseball, hands down. First of all, he hasn't made the playoffs ever, which is crazy to think that. Like, Steph Curry's won how many championships already, and Patrick Mahomes is going for his second championship. Like, Mike Trout's never made the playoffs. That's it's disgusting. So, and then they just can't hype him enough. And that's partially the social media aspect of it. A lot of these other guys are finding ways to really build their brand. That's why Trevor Bauer, which a lot of fans are very like hit or miss on him. They don't like his personality. Some people don't like his personality. Some people don't trust in his stuff. But the reality is that he's the smartest player right now because he's building. He had a great season. He just won a Cy Young, and he's building his social media and his online presence. And whether he performs awful next year, he's going to sign a big contract this year. He's going to sign probably $30 to $35 million for at least 1 year. And he's building his brand at the same time. And that's what all these other athletes in other sports are doing, except for hockey. Hockey's terrible. Hockey's terrible.
Why? What is it that like these sports just can't have the allure? I mean, again, and when you watch playoff hockey and you just hear, and it's off the post, like, and you hear that ding, you're like, God damn, this is like, and what is it that like we just lose in like certain sports?
It's the promotion. They just don't know how to keep the attention of the fans. Like, you got to think about how you're going to keep the fans into it. You know, you really have, that's the main key. You dump down all these sports. How much action is in a football game? There's 15 minutes. You break it down. Literally, there's in between plays, there's about 40 seconds. There's only 60 minutes to a game. So you every 40 seconds you get in a playoff. I mean, it's not that much action, but they find the way to monetize it. I mean, a lot of the social media stuff, a lot of the social media craze and stuff like that. There's a lot of live tweeting and again, the athletes have been built up. They do a good job building these storylines. And not saying they don't build storylines for other sports, for NBA, for hockey or MLB, but they're able to make it so much. I don't know. That's part of it, and they're also maybe baseball's too long. Maybe people think it's just too long. I mean, that's part of it too. But do
you put a timer on baseball?
Nah, I don't want to do that. I don't want to put.
There's something like again, like there is like, as much as like the home run's fun, like the pitchers duels, like when you can get it, like this is when I was in my baseball, like, watching every game, when you can get like a nasty pitchers duel, like it's like watching a chess game. Like, yeah, for a lot of the regular fan, that's boring. But when you can get down to it and like you get like into the intricacies of baseball and you get into like, when you start breaking it down, you're like, oh, this is intense, like granular stuff.
Well, that's why I love MMA so much, because it is a chess match, dude. Like, you get Tyron Woodley versus Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, and they're sitting there for five rounds, 5 minutes, 5 rounds, and you're sitting there going like, they're not striking at all, but they're sizing each other up, and they're trying to wait for that perfect spot to strike. It's probably two of the worst fights on paper, but for me, it was intense. It was like, anybody can get knocked out at any moment, but the fans didn't get it as much as the diehards did. You and I, someone that loves that chess match aspect of it. But in baseball, I like that, but people really are dying for this offensive kick. NFL, they're doing it too. It's all about the offensive swing. They get rid of the defense. They don't want defense at all. They just want offense. NBA, everyone just chucks threes.
Right.
It's all about chucking threes, and there's no defense whatsoever. If you can't even do I mean, it's been a long time since they've been do the hand check, but you can't do any. There's fouls every 30 seconds.
Fouls and travel.
Yeah, it's a no. Well, they don't even call traveling now anymore. It's terrible. Just let them go, because they just want the offense. In baseball, it's got so bad though, where it's like the offense is there, the home run is there. That's great, but everyone's striking out too much now, and they do have the shift too, which they might have to work on banning the shift. Which I'm not saying I'm for, but the fact is, people can get base hits. And now I say to that, you see a guy like DJ LeMahieu, a guy who used to be like Daniel Murphy, didn't make a difference where you played. They just found a way to get a base hit. People don't do that anymore. They're too busy trying to hit home runs. And I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I'm not saying that home runs is the worst part of the game, but when you strike out 200 times in a season, yeah, maybe that's a bad thing.
Yeah, I love, and that's one thing I think, again, and the UFC definitely has it. Obviously, the persona aspect, and it is where you can watch a fight, and I've learned way more since I started taking jujitsu. Like when you start to see the intricacies of what's going on when they're on the ground, and you see a little hand starting to burrow its way through something, or you start to see positioning of legs, and you start to learn what's actually going on. And it's no longer, it's like, what are these guys doing on the ground wrestling in their pajamas?
Right.
Like, no, there's a lot going on right now. And when you start to see that, that's when it gets super interesting. And that's something that, shockingly enough, like football has that, right? Because there's so much going on at the line, right? Basketball has that on like the movement element of it, right? But not as in depth. Baseball really has it, right? I would say probably the most, other than maybe like the line in football. And then hockey, obviously it's a different transition, but that intricacy again for the novice is just like, but when you can get down to the granular and you actually see what's going on, it's a totally different game. All of them.
With MMA though, dude, like, to get back to that, like you're right. Like when you first started watching MMA, and you couldn't. Some people, like, I try to convince people to watch it, and like I can't stand them when they're on the mat. Like, what are they doing? And that's part of the ref's fault too. When you sit there and the ref is just sitting there watching them, like just stalemate, and nothing's going on. Yeah, he's got to get more involved. But you take a Damian Maia,
Right.
And Kamaru Usman too. I mean, he's aggressive. Like watching what he did to Tyron Woodley was very impressive. Was it boring a little bit? Yeah, because you wanted to see a little bit more action. You want to see some sort of maybe. But that's Tyron Woodley.
Right.
That doesn't happen to Tyron Woodley. He's a good wrestler. He's got a great takedown defense. He got taken down for 5 rounds. It was embarrassing. But you see some of these other guys that when they're just rolling in and out of submissions, and it's incredible. It's Carlos Condit and Matt Brown had a very interesting fight in the beginning of the year, and that was just they stood for a little bit, but they were also on the ground, and they were. When you have that type of matchup, that's what you need to show. You need to show someone that sort of ground game, how it can be exciting, and that they just don't lay and pray.
Right, and that's the other thing about the UFC is like you can get that big home run. touchdown knockout, right? You can get that, at any given moment. There's an opportunity for that. But like for me, like, and that's where it starts, right? Like you're introduced to this idea of like, oh, these guys, like, you just want to see the knockout, right? But then as you learn the sport and as you learn, for me, it was once I started actually rolling in jiu-jitsu and you start to realize like how intricate it is. And a little bit before that too, but like once I started actually seeing the opportunities and again, that's from my perspective, which is like one step, like I'm just like, oh, there,
dude.
and then there's just like the multi-layers that are like, thousands of steps ahead of what's actually transpiring. That's where it gets like super interesting.
I mean, I haven't trained enough in it. I've trained for like a few years here and there, but I do remember like when we were like learning different moves. I'm like, oh my God, everything has an out. You can find an out on everything. And it might take a while to get there. And also depending on the position that you're in, but there's an out for almost everything. It's just crazy. And just that's why I do love it so much, man. I can sit here and talk MMA with you all day. We talk about matchups, talk about whatever, dude. Like I'll do this. I sit here there with people on a daily basis and nobody wants to hear it, but I'll talk about it with
you. So I want to go back. So what I want to go back to Conor for a second, because again, does he kind of fade out now? Like, does he just kind of become a road warrior?
So there's a couple different things here. Like, I don't think Conor's at that point in his career. First of all, he did look a little bit old. That was one thing about him. He looked a little old, a little stiff. Everyone's saying he's trained for boxing. He was trying to get that Pacquiao fight. That was the one thing that was a little – I can't stand that. Like, just stick with the MMA because you're best there. Manny Pacquiao, sure, I get it. Like, it's a name. It'll probably bring a lot of money. But it's not going to be a great fight. And you probably still lose, but he'll make a lot of money. That being said, though, I don't see him being – the type of like fighter where someone else has to like test, like UFC, there's those fights where it's like, okay, the old vet versus the young up and comer. Sure. And I'm going to pass the torch. I don't think Conor McGregor's looking to pass the torch anytime soon. I think he's still legit. I think there's some really amazing matchups with him that you could put together. First of all, the Nate Diaz trilogy is up there for sure. Sure. I don't think you ever want the Jorge Masvidal fight, but you could if he would go up to if Conor would go up to 170, which I think is too much for him, or if Jorge ever went down to 155 again. That would be incredible. That would be an amazing fight. You could have those two guys go at it, but there's still enough matchups for Conor, Tony Ferguson. Now Tony's fallen off, but that's a really good fight. I'd watch that. I think you'd watch that too. There's some really good, intriguing matchups for Conor. I think it's not the end of him. I think he does need to get himself checked a little bit as far as what he really stay focused on what he wants to do. If he's going to go boxing, just go to a boxing match and do it. But if he's going to fight MMA, which he said he wanted to fight 3 times this year, I haven't seen that happen in a long time.
Right. It's weird because I mean, from my perspective, I thought I was like, all right, the Cowboy Cerrone thing. Okay. All right. We're back on the horse now. And then I thought this fight that, I really thought this fight was going to be, just a bit more. Like I was expecting just a bit more, and it's kind of like, I don't know if I'm entertained by you that much as the fighting element. It's just, to me, and again, maybe this is just my novice approach to it. It just doesn't have the allure that it had at one point.
Well, that's what I asked somebody else, and they thought that he'd always bring that allure. Like that doesn't just. That's what he's a very special guy. Like again, you see the pay-per-view numbers. He's very special. That's almost like a Ronda Rousey.
Sure.
When Ronda Rousey lost to Holly Holm that first time.
Yep.
It took a year for her to come back in a cage, and the buildup was like, oh, the return of Ronda Rousey. Let's see what happens. And they never talked about Amanda Nunes, and then Amanda Nunes starched her. It was disgusting.
Right.
And Ronda Rousey was so out of her element. I think Conor McGregor is one of those guys where he is that good. You saw him face Nate Diaz that second time, and he did win that fight. Listen, went to the judges.
Sure.
It wasn't pretty. It was arguable. It could have gone Nate Diaz. It could have gone Conor. He won the fight. He went 5 rounds with him, though. That was legit. And that's the type of Conor McGregor I like to see, the guy that's like, I'm not going out like that. The Khabib I think if you fought Khabib again, I think it would be a little more entertaining. I think he would work on some other things. I don't think he was. I think he expected to go in there and knock Dustin out in 60 seconds. I really do. Like, he said it, but I really believe that. Like, you look at Conor's records, most of his damage is done in the first round. He
Sure.
wants it to be over so quick. I don't know if he likes to fight. I think he likes to smash people. I don't know if he likes to be in these wars. That's where I question that.
Yeah, the deeper waters, and that's been shown, that the deeper waters, whether it be his gas tank or whether it be his skill set, whatever you want to attribute to, the deeper waters are not for him.
No, not at all. Listen, he lasted with Nate. The Khabib fight went 4 rounds, which is impressive, I guess.
Sure.
But I mean, really, you look at everything, he's finishing people in the first, second round tops, Aldo 13 seconds. There's a reason why that happened. He wants people to engage him so he can counter strike, and he's got power in his fist. And Dustin did the smartest thing. He took him down so quick and wore him down to begin the fight. Like, between the calf kicks and taking him down, like, that was just smart game plan for Dustin.
Yeah, I thought he navigated that first round pretty well, and I was watching. I was like, oh, he actually, he touched the temperature of it pretty well. And there, Conor was taking those leg kicks, wasn't checking them at all. What I mean? That's going to start to pay off. But I was like, okay, all right, all right. And then all of a sudden, it was like it was like a light switch. Like, all of a sudden, like, one life meter went down, the other one just like went right up.
And it's funny because people say, and it's probably true, Conor, I think, did win the first round. But Dustin did enough to make Conor work. And he definitely – dude, when he started pointing at Conor in the middle of the fight, I'm like, something happened, dude. I didn't see it, but something changed right there.
There's an energetic change in that moment where all of a sudden, like, he realized, like, oh, it's like I have your number now. Like, I get, like, I figured you out. And
that's dangerous because we see people like we've seen Anderson Silva.
Sure.
They get clocked by Chris Weidman. So I hate that stuff because that always scares me because some people get bit after that. But it was cool to see Dustin do that. And listen, Dustin Poirier is a good dude, and he's someone that, like, deserves to get that. Like, he's been waiting to get a title for so long. He had the interim, but it's not the same,
Yeah, that interim shit kind of it gets. What do you think about that? I'm not a big fan of it.
I mean, I get why they do it because they don't want to hold the divisions up. Like,
sure.
Right now, could they have given an interim belt the other day? Sure, they could have, because Khabib is quote unquote retired, but I think he's done. I really do. I don't agree with it. I feel like they were just giving him out like candy.
Yeah, that was the thing, right?
Yeah, everyone had. I don't know if that was like just a thing because they felt like they needed to have a title fight like that. That's the UFC's mentality. Is in order to make a pay-per-view, we have to have a title fight. But yet, the past 2 Januaries, Conor McGregor has headlined the pay-per-view, and there's been no title. There was the Jorge Masvidal, Nate Diaz, which was a made-up belt that nobody really cared about. I mean, right. You sit there going like, "Oh my God, the BMF belt. That's like the heavyweight title, the welterweight." No, it's just a made-up thing. No one was sitting there because I want to see who's going to win the BMF belt. It was just a stupid, corny twist. But whatever. Like, you don't.
That's like the $1 million belt.
Oh my God!
Actually, the $1 million belt probably had more clout than the BMF belt.
Right. It reminds me of the Intercontinental belt. Like, it was always like a BS belt. Like, everyone's like, "Oh, who was this schlub?" They wanted to build him up. Whatever. Yeah, give him the Intercontinental. It's fine. All right.
No, but the Intercontinental Championship belt had a lot of. Again, I can't go down the Wikipedia page of who held an Intercontinental title.
Shawn Michaels.
That was the first one that came to mind was Shawn Michaels. So that's no schlub.
No, I know. Listen, I get it, dude. I rocked wrestling in the 90s too. 90s, I think maybe the early 2000s for like a split second, but definitely 90s, late 80s, the early 90s, I was into it, dude. I get it. And you're right. Those guys were legit champions. I think Bret Hart was a Intercontinental too. But that's the thing, is like the interim is like, our guys hurt, our guys inactive for whatever reason. So I get why they want to keep the division. That's maybe their philosophy, is trying to find a way to keep the division moving, because we've seen now, think about the heavyweight title, right? Stipe and DC have fought 3 times now over the past 3 years. That division's been on lock for 3 years now.
Yeah.
Francis finally getting a rematch with Stipe, which is very nice. But it's been DC and Stipe's show. You know, maybe Brock had that one moment that he was going to think about coming back, and that would have been kind of cool to fight DC. Didn't happen. But like, it's just, you want these divisions to move a little bit. Like that's why Israel Adesanya moved out of the middleweight division. That's why John Jones went out of the light heavyweight division, because John Jones went up. Well, again, back to John Jones saying his personality, I'm kind of over the shtick, but really he's light years ahead of all these guys in the light heavyweight division. He had no one else, nothing to prove over there. Not saying he dismantled, because the Thiago Santos fight was legit.
Yeah.
Not Angelo Reyes. What is it? The Dominic Reyes fight.
Dominic Reyes. Yep.
Yeah, that was a good fight. Anthony Smith was kind of lackluster, but he went up and down that division. Like, what are you supposed to do?
Yeah, but that division's weird. It's a weird division. It's like you have these guys, again, maybe it's just because Jones is that good, but you have these guys who are like, like there's no one you're like, oh yeah, like you knew those two fights, that like you knew the outcome of those fights.
Johnny Walker was the guy I really wanted. That was the guy that I thought that was really going to step up and kind of make that like Cody Garbrandt ride, the Conor McGregor ride. I thought Johnny Walker was that guy. And then Corey Anderson dismantled him.
Yeah.
That one fight. And that was just, listen, he's an okay fighter. He's got to learn a couple things. He's still got a lot of talent. When I saw him knock out Khalil Roundtree, that's where I was like, this guy's got something. Because Roundtree's not a joke.
He's huge.
You know? Huge dude. He's one of the hardest hitters in the sport, person speaking. I think the way when he lands those kicks, dangerous, dude.
Yeah.
And Johnny Walker dismantled him.
What do you think about that Stipe fight?
It's interesting. Stipe is the first Stipe fight with DC, a lot of people said that Francis touched up Stipe a lot, which is why he got knocked out by DC that first fight. He didn't see the punch coming, which is part of it, but they think that he was injured because Francis really put he won 5 rounds, and it looked like Stipe controlled all of the fight, but Francis tagged him a few times.
Sure.
So Francis, I think, is just going to be blazes, guns a blazing, and I think it'll be very interesting. I don't know how long it'll last, but if Stipe does what he does, I think it'll just be back on the mat most of the fight.
Yeah, he's like one of those fighters, again, not all that that much stick to him, or not all that much again, not the WWE persona, but he's just that fucking good. And when you watch his fight, you're like, he's that technical and that precise and that accurate. Like, that's the thing about him that really separates him, is like, he's accurate as shit, right? And he can bang. Like, he'll stand in there and he'll bang. Yeah. But then you have like Ngannou is like that's a different type of bang. Yeah, dude. I mean, honestly, I've stood next to him a couple times, and he's just beastly, dude. Like, he's scary, man. But nice guy. That's the thing, is like, he's such a sweet dude. Yeah. Didn't he? Well, what did he do in the studio with you? We the couple times, the first time we were in there was the first time he actually had a translator the first time with him, because he was working on his English this whole time. Very nice guy. The first time had this nice blue suit on. I remember that. And then the second time was when he was fighting Stipe, and my son was with us, and he gave him a hug, picked him up, was just he took these crazy pictures with him, and it was just like such a nice guy. The funny thing about Francis is, I mean, obviously you see his background. You saw that how hard he had to work to get to where he is. He cares about his hometown. It doesn't get a lot of credit at all. Like, they really have been pushing him to the side. And I think there was a hiccup somewhere. Obviously, after he lost to Stipe, and then there was a Derek Lewis fight that nothing happened. That was a big flop of a fight, right? That was a fight that everyone was expecting fireworks. And again, it goes to the point of like, there's a difference between there being, measuring each other's distance, measuring the range, because again, at any given moment, someone can land a huge punch and this whole fight's over, right? So there's a difference between that, right, and the technical aspect of it, and then there just being like no action, and that's what that fight was, right? And I think he was worried about Derek Lewis, which, by the way, Derek Lewis had a major injury, so he was like, you don't want to throw with me? That's totally fine. Like, I'll sit back and I'll just kind of outpoint you. He was timid because of the Stipe fight, and then you see what happened after that. Like, he kind of fell out of the wayside of the UFC, and since then he has just been on a roll. Like, he's wrecking house.
Like everyone they put up against him, he's knocking out in seconds. That guy Rosenstrike is no joke.
Right.
Curtis Blades, I was so pumped for that rematch, and that was just again
Nothing.
another good wrestler. Like Curtis Blades is a great wrestler, and I mean Francis just, I'm not wasting time. I'm just gonna knock you out, dude.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a weird fight because it really, it could either be Stipe just being calculated and meticulous and tight and just like landing those combos and just sitting in there and having like that accuracy that he has, or it could just be just a huge blow that just ends everything.
Well, I mean, listen, that could come at any time. That could go to the 5th round, and Francis, I think, could still land any shot at any point in time
Right.
and end the fight. But Stipe, this is the greatest of Stipe. This is why, I mean, I'm not going to say that he's a GSP Anderson Silva, but he's arguably one of the best heavyweights of all time. And the greatest about him is that he can walk through punches, and he can control fights where he wants to control them. And that's tough. Like some people may say, "Oh, that's a little boring," but he's not stupid. He doesn't want to get knocked out by Francis Ngannou, so he's going to find a way to beat him, and
Yeah.
he's okay with winning a fight rather than getting knocked out.
Right.
And that take that.
Right. And that's a testament to like the patience, right? Like just being patient, knowing that you can go into, and he can go into very deep waters, right? You can go into deep rounds and he'll be fine. You know what I mean? He doesn't like really, he gets a little dinged up, but he doesn't like cut or bleed very easily. You know what I mean? Which is like any type of concern. So like he can go into those deep rounds, take some licks and still stay in there. And like I said, he's just very tight and accurate and just like finds his way,
And he's cold-blooded too. Like I talked to one of his friends all the time, and he's just like, dude, he's cold-blooded. Like he's this cool, chill guy, but as soon as the cage door closes, just goes off, man. And he's not messing around. And he's very confident. Like that's the other thing too. Like very confident. I've been told like he just sizes people up left and right. Like I can take that guy. Like that's crazy. Like I don't sit there and look at anybody and be like, oh, I can knock that guy out. I don't care about that stuff. These guys are like looking like I know how to take that guy out. That's crazy, dude.
Well, I mean, chances are good he can knock out in 99% of the general
Yes.
public.
Yes. Oh yeah. No questions asked. But I mean, the fact that I would never size anybody up like that. I can't do that. Like, and then you listen. The Francis is the only guy I size up. I'm like, dude, I get my ass kicked. That guy's gonna kill me. Like, I don't want to mess with these guys. I can't do that.
Yeah,
Him and Yo, the two scariest people. Francis was so sweet, but Yoel Romero was the scariest guy I ever met. I was talking to him. I had an interview with him, and it was after the Whitaker fight. It was one of the fights where he was off by a couple pounds. He came off the scale. He had to weigh in again, and whatever the case was, like he was walking off, and it looked like he was limping. Like he didn't walk. He like kind of like hopped off and all this weird stuff. And I said to him, I was like, dude, were you hurt? Like what actually went on? And he looked at me dead in the face. He's like, I'm okay, man. I was okay. I was like, okay. Like he didn't want. Like I was just like, he's like that's it. Like don't even ask me another question about my health because I'm gonna turn it on you and I'm gonna punch you out.
Yeah.
Like he's one of those guys who's just like a nice guy, real like was real fun and friendly and stuff like that. But like, don't get too crazy on like deep questions with him. You might find out an answer you don't want to hear.
Well, the funny thing about him is, and like I hate to ever compare myself to any human being. Like I stay in my lane to the best of my ability. But when you look at someone like him, and he refers to himself as the soldier of God, right? So let's just put that on the board, right? And then you realize that he's 5'10", 185, right? And he's 45 years old.
No, he's not that old. He's is he 42? Is he he's in his 40s.
Let's just all right. Maybe let's just say in his 40s for whatever it is.
Regardless,
right?
He's in his 40s.
Regardless. And I look at him like, oh, you're 1 inch taller than me. And at one point I've lost a little bit of weight, but at one point we were the same weight. Like we are the same size person, right? So if you just like took a silhouette and was like, this guy's 5'10", 5'9", this guy's 185, this guy's 185, boom. And then you have a picture of Yoel Romero and Vinny Brusco. They're very different fucking human beings.
Dude, Rogan talks about it all the time. That guy's just built differently. Like he is just built. Like,
it's crazy. I don't even. And then you see his workout regimen, full splits. I mean, just it doesn't even make sense.
No, it doesn't. That's the thing is like you sit there and you look at him, and I really think that like I think his back is really effed up. I think he's got like a broken vertebrae, something like that, because he looks so stiff at times. But then you're right, he's doing splits, he's doing cartwheels. I'm like, what are you doing? How can you do that? How?
Gigantic. Like it's just he is like imagine going to war on the front line, right? And like you're there and you're ready to go and charge this other army, and there on the other end is Yoel Romero. You're just like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Like this, okay. I mean, okay. He's just a different human being. Like
Yeah,
he's
I
cut
don't
from a different cloth.
Yeah, I'm not messing with that. Like I'm literally not. Like he was intimidated just to talk to him. Like I was like, okay, I asked him stupid questions. Like Jorge Masvidal was like that too. When I first met him, like he just seemed like he had this aura presence. Like I'm not gonna mess with that guy. Is
it like I don't want to be bothered, or is it just like
don't ask me stupid shit?
Yeah.
If you ask me something stupid, I'm gonna put you in place. And they're quick like that. Like they have different backgrounds. There's a lot of like there's so many different backgrounds and personalities. Like we talk about like baseball. Like I'm a big baseball guy. You don't think these guys were going like not everyone thinks that they had to go through hell to play baseball. Not everyone's freaking El Duque. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like coming from Cuba. Was it Cuba they came from?
Cuba,
like
yeah,
you ever see the 30 for 30 or whatever it was? Like these guys, they're fighting for their lives. Like Jorge Masvidal was in that Kimbo Slice, those videos, the backyard wrestling and stuff like that, the backyard fighting. So they came from like a whole different background. Like, not everyone's like, well, I was a college wrestler and there was something else for me to do, so I just joined MMA.
Right.
Yeah, that's some people's stories, but that's not everyone's story. There's a lot of different stories out there. It's crazy.
Yeah. How do you navigate that when like do you just kind of feel the energy to like who they are and their temperament, or do you kind of just keep it as professional as possible?
I've tried to get like a little edgy here and there. Like, first of all, I'm a fan of most of these guys anyway. Like, there's very few people that I don't like, even Colby Covington. And you can criticize me as much as you want. It's fine. I don't like the stuff he says, but I think he's a great fighter. And I told him that. And when he came in, I told him, I was like, you must have felt like you stepped in dog shit when you fought Damian Maia. And he looked at me like, what are you talking about? I'm like, dude, Damian Maia is one of the best jiu-jitsu fighters of all time. And you end up trading punches with him for 3 rounds.
Right.
Like, that's not what I expected to happen. I thought this legit wrestler versus legit jiu-jitsu artist were going to be like this big mad scramble and just be crazy like rolls and grapples and all stuff. There was none of that. Right. So you must have like, this guy can't outstrike me. This is great. So he kind of just like passed to the side, like whatever type of thing. But like, there's certain people that I don't mind, like Colby. I didn't feel intimidated by at all. But there's some guys that I try to respect their boundaries and stuff like that. I try not to. I try to give them the best opportunity, and I want to make them feel comfortable. That's really what it comes down to, Yeah.
Is there anyone that stands out to you that was exceptionally great or exceptionally terrible?
Mike Perry was very weird. Like I love Mike Perry. I think he's an amazing fighter in the cage. He's just very off his game though. Like in like a social setting, like interview wise, like he was. But my co-host was like asking what tattoos you got. He's just sitting there taking off his shirt. I'm like, I don't need to see that. I don't care that much about your tattoo. But he was saying like,
you can just say your tattoo. You can just say I have this tattooed on me here, and we'll get an idea of what it is. I don't need to see it.
And where like Yoel Romero was giving me like those looks like you don't want to ask any more questions about that. Like Perry was like the things he was saying was like legit. Like, yeah, this is what I'm gonna do, and I'm gonna fucking kill him, and this and that, and dropping the F-bombs, dropping every bomb in the world. It's like, okay, like this guy's just going full. He's going full tilt, bro. He's and that was years ago. That was before he's got run into like a lot of trouble now.
Yeah.
So he's like, but again, like I love to interview him because I want to talk to him because I loved his skills in the cage. His outside stuff, someone's got to really step up and like really help him out a little bit.
He needs a Tony Robbins.
Oh, he needs 2 of them, bro. Seriously, he's on a different world than Conor is. That's for sure. As far as the best, the chillest people, I mean, like I've interviewed Chris Weidman a couple times, and he's just super lax. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like he's just chill, like just chill.
Which makes it kind of hard too sometimes, right? When someone's just like too chill about things, like, all right, come on, let's get like, especially like if you're in that arena, right? If you're talking MMA, you're talking UFC, you're talking fighting, you kind of want someone to kind of I don't want to say break out of character, but like you want to see a side of them. But if someone's too like reserved, and some of those people are just like silent assassins, right? And that's their demeanor, and that's how they're like samurai. They just stay in their composure, right? And that's how they do perform. But sometimes like in an interview setting, that could be like a kind of like a dead fish.
Yeah, no, for sure. And like, listen, he had some good stories. That's the thing is he did give a lot of information. I was like, I never heard that stuff. But he was just way too casual. Where it's like, I don't know how we're gonna get there. Like, it was a little bit more digging, I guess.
Yeah.
But Rory McDonald was someone who was very interesting because he was so straight with his answers. But like you ask him something, he was honest as anybody else. Like he was talking about retirement before one of his last fights at Bellator, and then he ended up losing that fight. And I saw him. I'm like, you know what? Not for nothing. I look back at that interview. Like, I don't know if anybody else had talked about retirement with him, but like if they did, maybe they could have seen how this fight was be so lackluster because he seemed like he had nothing left in the tank. And his interview post fight was just like, yeah, sorry guys, I don't got it right now. Like something's off. You know what I mean? And this guy had a battle years prior with Robbie Lawler where his face was basically falling off, his nose was broken. It was just crazy. So it's just like some of these guys, you just have to feel it out.
Yeah, walk on that razor's edge.
Yeah.
But you're not like you have a very calming temperament. Like you're not out to get anybody. You have no like agenda other than just getting information and like, you know, and doing the best you can for yourself and for the network and for, you know, your listeners. So like, you don't have like this edge to you that's like, I'm going to get this motherfucker, you know?
Well, no, but I think a lot of these people think that.
Right. Exactly.
That's our agenda anyway. Like, you know, I built a really good relationship with Jan Gomes. So like I have him on my show all the time and we text all the time. But I do towards the end of our podcast, I always get into baseball stuff all the time. And I ask questions about former teammates and what's going on in baseball in general. And the awesome thing about Jan is he's a fan of MMA. He knows some of these guys. He knows Stipe personally. He knows a lot of these fighters. But he's just a fan of like other sports too. So we'll sit there and talk about baseball like me and you were talking about baseball, or me and my son talking about baseball. Like, oh, did you see that trade happen? Oh yeah, it was crazy. I can't believe that. Or I'm like talking about like Real Muto, this guy JT Real Muto re-signing with the Phillies. Be like, dude, if the Phillies didn't do that, what the hell are they doing? Because, you know, they just brought Bryce Harper in. Like, how are you not going to try to build around Bryce Harper? So like,
right.
This guy's a catcher for the Washington Nationals, but yet he's sitting there talking about like his opinion on other teams and how, you know, it's going to be he's excited for the rivals this year and how it's going to be a crazy NL East because everyone's stacked this year. Just like he's kind of a fanboy too at times. It's kind of dope. So, but he knows that like I sometimes ask a question or two where it's like digging for a little extra. It's like, dude, I got nothing for you. I got no extra. I can't give you any soundbite on that. Sorry, man. I'm like, all right, I tried.
I played the fifth.
Yeah, and listen, it is what it is. We're all I'm not trying to get anybody in trouble, but I have a question. I want to know this answer. You might actually have that answer. You're more knowledgeable with this than I am. That's what I'm asking you.
Right, you know? Right. If you can give it, you can. If you can't, I get it.
Exactly, dude. Exactly. Dana's like that too. Dana White. If you ever talk to Dana White, he's someone that if he likes you, he'll throw you a bone. If you ever get a chance to talk to him, he's amazing. If he likes you, if you get a good interview out of him, he will throw you a bone and he knows how to blow up your social media. I'll tell you that much.
How was that experience?
Awesome. I've talked to him plenty of times. The first interview I ever had. So quick story. The first interview I ever did face to face was Dana White. It was the first UFC in New York. And I was driving, I was trying to leave, get there early, get downtown early. And I got stuck in an hour and a half traffic because some sort of like drug lab blew up and I was stuck in traffic. I literally pulled up. He got into the studio before I did. And I wanted to like go to the bathroom and like get a cup of coffee. I got nothing. He literally sat in the studio. My buddy pressed record. I sat down. We gave like a 25-minute interview. He was awesome. Broke some news about Conor McGregor. Broke news that Khabib, Nurmagomedov, and Michael Johnson were going to be fighting on that card. We talked about football. We talked about tons of stuff. Just a really fun, loose conversation. And it was awesome. So
that's cool.
Yeah.
He gets a lot of shit though.
Yeah. But which commissioner of any sport league doesn't get shit?
Yeah, it's true. That's true. But I feel like he, like out of all of them, he, especially during like when there's nothing else going on, to create Fight Island and to do all that. What is this? Did they sign for a certain amount of fights, or like what's the background behind it? Do you know about that?
I mean, listen, they always go. They've been going to Abu Dhabi now prior to Fight Island anyway, but they have a good relationship with them, and basically, they needed a place to set up people to fight, and
Right.
with the least amount of restrictions, especially for people from Europe, because no one in Europe can really come to the States right now. So that was the best bet. I mean, they're going back to Vegas this weekend. That they're starting to go back to Vegas. I'm not sure. I think they're actually going to let people in. I think there's going to be a crowd of 258 on February 13th, which is dope. That's good.
That's cool.
But they're probably back to Abu Dhabi again too. I'm sure they'll probably go back for the summer again. So
Yeah.
it's a good spot for them, man. You know.
Yeah. Pete, I love you, man. I'm so happy that we got a chance to catch up.
This was awesome.
This was great, man. I appreciate it. Where can people connect with you? Where can people listen to the podcast? Where can people get more of you?
So on Twitter, at the Hoff WFAN, my show is called The Fight Fan with Pete Hoffman. So you can follow me on Twitter. The show page at The Fight Fan WFAN, WFAN.com, radio.com, just Pete Hoffman or The Fight Fan with Pete Hoffman. You'll find it. I got YouTube page too and stuff like that. So I'm all out there. You just type The Fight Fan with Pete Hoffman. You'll find it somewhere.
I will have all the information in the description. Pete, thank you so much, man. It was such a pleasure getting to touch base with you. I'm so happy for you. Congratulations again on the podcast and all the success to you, brother.
Vinny, dude, thanks so much, man. Seriously, this was a blast. I have to return a favor. You have to come with me, come on my show one time soon too, and let me know when you want me to chill and chat again soon, because this was dope. But I also want to grab a beer with you too, maybe. That'd be nice.
Whatever you want.
When this pandemic is over, I'd like to like catch up with people again. That'd be really nice. To live a normal life and have do something normal, man.
Well, we were supposed to do this in the pod shed,
yes.
But then obviously we got bombarded by some snow. So
yeah, with 15 inches of snow. Yeah, so that was
and more to come. Pete, thank you again, brother. Much appreciated.
Vinny, be safe, brother. Thank you.
Pete.